It didn't add up. And I'm looking at, and I started to research, and I found out these things are true, what they're talking about. And then, I looked at Kennedy's like political agenda. He was trying to, he literally was trying to stop the CIA from meddling in foreign affairs, from starting little side third-party wars, basically, and funding them, and using the drug trade and all these things. And it was a lot less back. Well, no, I mean, they were pushing LSD and different things, so it was starting. It was in the 60s. But okay, so yeah, I'm like, wow, I guess Kennedy wasn't really such a bad guy. I had no idea, though, until this past year, that Kennedy was going to take back the printing of U.S. notes to the Treasury.
Right.
And that guys, that's the cherry on the cake. I mean, you want a reason? Not to mention the other president who tried that was Lincoln. Well, that's funny. Gee, they both ended up dead. You'd think someone didn't want that to happen. That was weird. Actually, Lincoln wasn't trying to take it back. He was trying to print interest-free currency, the Lincoln greenback.
The greenback, yeah.
The greenback. But same concept. Whereas JFK was trying to take it back from the private banking system known as the Federal Reserve.
Right.
So anyway, that's what got me started and opened my mind to conspiracies and it told me, and at that time I thought the CIA was just like responsible for all of it. I mean, you had guys in uniforms with badges show up. No one knew what agency they were from, but they had to listen to them and during the autopsy and omit certain things. That I just assumed it was the CIA, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I have no doubt the CIA is the one who pulled it off. Most definitely. Were they the masterminds? I don't think so. Anyway, but the JFK is what started opening my mind to the ability to look at conspiracy. But I never seriously took anyone seriously when they mentioned 9/11. I was just like, no way, dude. Come on. The planes went down. It was totally possible. That's really hot jet fuel. That sounds so ignorant now, doesn't it, everyone? Yeah. So my mind started to open to these things, but I didn't really go further at this point. I knew there was some level of conspiracy and that the government didn't tell you everything. And then really at this point, I started to care less about politics.
Yeah.
I mean, Obama's in office. He's horrible anyway. And I did not understand at this point Bush's role. We would go for... had a guy I was a ministry partner with down there, a lay ministry partner, but we worked together leading a young adults group at my church. It was kind of like my project. And I remember we'd go to breakfast and have a meeting with this other guy who was a part of it, and he'd be talking about Obama and Nancy Pelosi. Funny how Nancy Pelosi dropped off the map after the first 2 years. Anyway, but even then I was just like, you know what? I don't really care. God's got his plan and I'm cool with it. And so what? There's a little conspiracy. What's going to happen is going to happen.
Right.
Well, so life goes on. I get married. And
you started to become a man.
Yeah. That's real man, not one of those prideful, egotistical men.
I feel like that's like what kind of separates you from, I don't know. I feel like there was something that changed that day for me anyways. Like,
oh yeah.
Maybe not
instantly that day,
but that was the beginning of like a total mind shift, wow.
It really is. And you know what? To you single men and women out there, if you're listening,
if you're committed, that is.
Oh yeah, you got.
Because there's a lot of people that get into it and are not committed and don't have that mind shift.
And we'll actually get into that with my story too. But to say to you guys who are single out there, or if you're engaged, getting married, guys, look, if you're freaking out, you're not ready for marriage. No one's ready. I swear to you. No one is ready, because you have never ever shared your bed, shared your food, shared every waking moment with one person. And here's what's happened. You've got your needs and desires, and you've got his or her needs and desires, depending on your gender. And you come together and you start to realize the first step in just how selfish you are. Mm-hmm. Wow, I have to consider her needs above my own, or you have to consider his needs above your own, or whatever, etc., etc. And it's just like, wow. It's overwhelming. Well, 6 weeks after we were married, I lost my job. I got torpedoed by my supervisor, and my boss, who was my pastor's nephew, believed him, and I got fired. So 3 weeks later, I get hired by another guy in our church, a friend of my dad's, and a friend of mine. He was my first wrestling coach at the first school. And good guy, good Christian fella. And I mean, he couldn't pay me much, but he gave me close solid 40 hours a week at I think it was like 50 cents above minimum wage. But Elizabeth was working at the same time, and it covered us. During that time, I had my first bout with my stomach problems. I had cramping, blood in my stool, and a severe acid reflux just show up. And I thought, wow, this must be because of stress. I lost my job. Money's really tight. Well, I go and get some scopes done, and I'm told you have IBS. Here's some dietary changes you can make. It's very manageable. Okay. They give me Nexium for my acid reflux and take me home. And at this point, I'm not really questioning the medical system still.
Yeah.
Taking things at face value.
Yeah.
Well, because of this, I was out of so much work. I went to my boss and I told him, man, look, I can't work and it's not fair to you. This is busy season. This is July. You know, I'm going to resign. I know it's a difficult position for you being a family friend, and I don't want to put you in that position. And he appreciated that and said, you know, when I got better, come back. And he'd make room for me, or try to. So I quit, or I like to say resigned that job for the sake of a friend. And I started selling cutlery, Cutco, cooking knives. Yeah, best cutlery there is. And I'm a salesman. I'm pretty good at it. That controlling manipulative thing does come in a little handy. Sorry, not.
That's why I'm not a good salesman.
not. I don't mean that to be like, you know, I got everyone to buy the big set, but you know, you learn how to present information in a certain way to make it appealing.
No, there's definitely a knack to selling and that whole route.
And so anyway, I did well, but the problem was I lived in a very rural area of Pennsylvania. I mean, if I was living in like the suburbs of Lancaster or the burbs outside of New York City, man, I would have been making money. I would have been making $70,000 plus a year selling kitchen knives. I mean, it's true. Where people got money, they'll pay. They don't think about it. So I did that, and it barely got us by, and a lot of times it didn't. It was my parents would come and they bought groceries. They'd bring them to us. People from church would just drop groceries off. Sometimes we just got envelopes full of money. So God was providing, but I really could have been looking for other work. And then I tried selling Kirby vacuum cleaners. And look, okay, I'm going to admit it. I've looked at them. They're probably the best vacuum cleaner out there. Fine. Don't pay $2,500 for a vacuum cleaner, dude. It's not worth it. I don't care if it can shampoo your face. Do not pay $2,500 for a vacuum cleaner, dude. It's not worth it. It's ridiculous. And I just, you know, in good conscience, I couldn't ask these mainly elderly people who you're selling to. I didn't feel right about it. So I stopped, and I just stopped looking for work. During this time too, I'm not handling the marriage selfishness thing very well, and I'm becoming very, very self-centered on me. And doing what I want, and I'm really ignoring Elizabeth. And she became more of a thing to me. You know, I get to have sex with her. I can't get in trouble with God for it, and this is cool. And I'm going to sit here and watch my movies, play my video games, and continue on in my single life, and occasionally do things with her. I was a total jerk. And this is the leading up to like the last 6 months of my pastoral internship. And the pastor who did our premarital counseling, he knew. James would ask me every week, how are you and Elizabeth doing? Oh, I think we're doing pretty good, you know. I had no idea. I'm not talking to my wife. Come Christmas time, come December that year, we're running our church's Christmas coffee house, you know, Nimrod's house. Anyway, sorry. But we brought, and it was really cool. We brought a real focus to the gospel, reaching out to the community. We basically told the church, you come, you're serving cookies, you're in the live nativity outside, you're greeting people. This is for the community. We're trying to reach people with the gospel. And we saw a ton of people come, and we saw a lot of people come to know Christ. It was great. And you go, wow, that's awesome. But, you can be doing everything else right. But as a spouse, your first responsibility is to God and then to your spouse. Before anyone else, before any other commitment, but even before your children, your first commitment is to your spouse. And now that doesn't mean that there's only enough food for your spouse. You only let her eat. No, you don't eat, and she probably will eat very little. And then you take care of your children. That's not what I'm saying. Let's be practical, everyone. But it was good for like really 2 days. It was this huge success. Elizabeth and I worked together, and it was kind of cool. I thought, wow, this is nice. I'd like to do more of this. And I was realizing kind of like what I was missing. Well, she went up to her parents the 5 days leading up to Christmas, and I stayed down home to work because when my in-laws came down for that coffee house to help us with it, and standing in the basement of the house Elizabeth and I are renting, and my father-in-law has a real man-to-man heart conversation with me. He says, Daniel, you need to go out, you need to find work, you need to provide for your wife. Elizabeth is scared, and she's not trusting you, and this isn't good for your marriage. And I was like, okay, I can kind of see that. My dad had a very similar conversation with me right after the coffee house. So my dad was more like, you're being a pansy, suck it up, be a man, you know what you're doing is wrong. A lot more direct than my father-in-law, but hey, that's my dad. He's got that right. And I appreciate both of them doing that. It was a wake-up call. Well, Elizabeth goes up for Christmas, and I stay home, and I'm looking for work, and I applied a bunch of places. I come up, and my wife is sour and bitter beyond what you couldn't believe. She didn't want to see me. She slept as far away from me in the bed as possible. It was bad. We had a huge fight up at my in-laws. And then we came back home, and she started sleeping on the couch. And for about the next 7 weeks, she would not sleep in our bed. She wouldn't come near me. And, that was obviously a big flag. Okay, something is really wrong here. And so I went to James, the pastor in our premarital, and I told him what had been going on. And it was a scary time. Elizabeth wrote a letter to me and said, at this point in time, I don't really care about our marriage. I'm ready just to live life miserable the rest of my life with you.
Wow.
That was really rough. And that's not what I wanted. I was ready to listen, unlike in premarital counseling. And I started to do what James said. You got to love your spouse. You got to love your wife as like Christ loved the church. And that means at the time I did get a job. God answered that prayer very quickly when I started seeking in earnest. And he moved me up quickly. I got a job with a cleaning company for a couple movie theaters. It started as a movie theater. And within a week, the supervisor had quit. And as you know, I did the white glove cleaning inspections as a kid, so I can clean. And the owners noticed very quickly I knew what I was doing. And they said, hey, we'd like you to be our new supervisor after working there a week. And I got promoted over people who had been there for a long time. And, some folks weren't happy, but, we got the job done. And then Elizabeth started working with me there. That was the first time we worked together. And that honestly was a good thing because it wasn't a personal relationship, but it was a place where we could talk. We had to work together, but it was professional, yet unified. We stood as one. And all this time I'm getting counseling from James, just me at this time. And I'm coming home after working. And this is what James said. I don't care if you only get 1 hour of sleep a day, Dan. You stay up, you wash the dishes, you clean the house, you do the laundry, you do whatever it takes to show her that Christ loves her, that you love her like Christ does. That you will sacrifice everything for her good. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about 3 weeks, and man, I was tired.